Hi, Otto here for Bavarian Autosport. In today's video, we're going to be showing you how to use a spring compressor to replace springs, shocks, or struts on a typical BMW or Mini. Everything you see in this video today is available in our online store at bavauto.com. Now here are the tools and parts we'll be working with today. The spring compressor, which is required for every front shock or spring replacement on every BMW or Mini, and on some of the rear applications to compress the spring to be able to take the assembly apart. We'll also be installing, in addition to the fresh shock and or spring, new lower spring pads, upper pads, compression absorbers, and dust boots. All of these parts are included in our shock installation kits under one part number. We'll also replace the upper shock mount. This is the front. If we were doing a rear, we'd also replace the upper mount at the rear. All right, here we are at the bench with our original shock and spring assembly, our strut as most people would call it, and our spring compressor tool. What we're going to do now is compress the spring so we can disassemble the upper mount and spring plate. When we install our new shock, we'll want this spring and the spring plate, even though we'll be installing a new mount and new bumper and dust boot hardware. So let's go ahead and do that now. Here's our spring compressor. We've chosen the large spring saddles for this application. Now we'll take the upper saddle and put it on top of the spring seat, and the lower saddle will go on one of the lower coils. Now we're doing it this way because otherwise we'd only be able to pinch 2 coils, maybe 3 here, and we actually already tried that and it did not compress the spring far enough to be able to take all of the tension off the mount. So notice on the spring seats here, the lock tabs are on both of these. We'll have the lock tab inside the spring and inside the upper seat here. That'll be sure that the compressor won't fall off. There we go, all the way on. Now again, the big point is make sure that lock tab is inside the spring seat so that it can't come off once we're compressed. So this looks good. We're down on our lower coil. We'll hand tighten until it's up in place. And then we'll grab a socket to work the tool here. And we'll continue to tighten the thread, and this will compress the spring. And now you can see this coil is lifting off the seat right here. Okay, now you can see the shock is loose. We're ready to remove the nut. You can see here we have our nut and the shock shaft. The shock shaft on this application has an Allen head recess in the top of the shaft to hold the shaft while we loosen the nut. We'll use an Allen key in the shaft, and we're going to use a spark plug socket to loosen the nut. Now this particular socket is 13/16. This nut is it's either 21 or 22 millimeters, and the 13/16 fits right on there. And the reason we're using a spark plug socket is so that we can insert our Allen tool through the center where we'd normally put our extension or our ratchet, and use a wrench on this hex to do the nut. And that's unique to a spark plug socket. Now if you have a different size nut, these spark plug sockets are available in different sizes. 13/16 is the normal large size that you'd be used to on most domestics, older BMWs, etc. There are various smaller sizes as well for the different nut sizes on the shocks. So what we'll do here is hold the shock shaft and loosen the nut. like this. Now I'll show you one other variation. If the end of the shock has a male hex on the end instead of the female Allen, we would use a similar setup, except we'd use a 1/4 inch drive ratchet extension and whatever size socket fits the end of the shock. We'd put the socket on the end of the shock, put the spark plug tool back in, then insert our ratchet extension into the end of the socket, again to hold the shock shaft, and use our wrench in the same way. So back to our Allen here, and we'll loosen this until we can pull the mount off. Now at some point this will loosen without the shock shaft turning, so we can just remove this, and you can see the mount is loose now. And there's our nut. And you can see we just have the shaft and the mount. Pull the mount off. And there's a couple of washers here. This cupped washer goes right up on the underside of the mount to protect the bearing. Kind of like a dust shield. So we'll reuse this, and this separator washer, we'll use this too. We'll put them back together the same way when we put the new assembly together. Now we can just remove the shock. Now this assembly here, we are going to reuse this spring plate, but we want to put a new rubber spring seat on. So we'll decompress the spring fully, install the new rubber seat, and then recompress it just like this. For the moment, whenever you're not working with this, but if it's compressed, take the assembly and set it out of your work area. Here's our old shock. This is the compression bumper, and this is the dust boot. You'll often find that these are very beat up and deteriorated. This one is harder than normal, and the boots can get ripped up. We're going to replace both of these, as well as the lower rubber spring seat. And here you see all of our new parts. We have our new shock absorber. This is the shock install kit, plus a new upper mount. This is our lower spring seat, upper spring seat, the compression bumper, and the dust tube. Now that will all install on this original style SOX replacement shock. One note, if you are installing a Bilstein, notice that the shaft is not the same size. So obviously this piece will not fit on here, and we already have a dust boot. So we will not use these pieces on the Bilstein application. We will still use the lower spring seat and the upper seat, and of course a new mount. Now with the Bilstein, the reason we don't use these, obviously the new boot is here, and you don't see a compression bumper at all. The compression bumper on a Bilstein is inside the shock at the bottom, so there's no need for this. So if you're installing a Bilstein, again, you don't need these two pieces, you just need the new rubber spring seats. Now on this shock, to install this, notice this ridge and the corresponding ridge on the dust boot. These actually snap together. You can install it from the top, oftentimes easier to go from the bottom. Pull the bumper up through and mount that tab, or that ridge. There, just like that. And then we slide onto the shock shaft. That's ready to go. We have our new spring seat. Maybe put this on first. Here, we'll do that. So spring seat, And this won't stay totally in place until we have the spring on it to seat it. But notice it goes in a very specific place. Match up the divots. Then we'll put our bumper back on. We're now ready for the spring assembly. Okay, now here we have our compressed spring with the upper spring plate and that new spring rubber on the top. This is ready to assemble. Spring rubber here, up through the spring plate until the shock mates. And then we have, remember, our two washers, the cup and the flat washer. We'll put those here. We'll see if we can make it so you can see it. At least a little bit. Put those on the shaft. And our new mount. And we're ready for the nut in the socket. And we'll use our same tools to tighten the nut. Now, you've probably seen people use an impact gun on this nut. It makes it very easy. You just zap the nut, it runs down, it's tight, you don't have to hold the shaft. We also get the calls that the top threaded part of the shaft has snapped off from using an impact gun. Specifically, do not use an impact gun to run the nut down on this. If that top of the shock breaks off, that is a non-warranty failure. Now for final tightening, we'll use the box end with our tool installed. Now torque on these top nuts is usually in the area of 25 to 35 foot-pounds. You can check your Bentley manual for the actual figure. So we're all set here, new mount and the assembly going together here. Now all we need to do is line up the spring with the spring plate. And there's two ways you can do that if it's not totally obvious. If we look at our old spring rubber here, we can see that the end of the coil was right here. Now this is the divot right here, and the end of the coil was about 1.5 inches past that, so right over here. So what we'll do, locate the end of the coil right here, and as we come together, we'll have to decompress the spring to get a proper alignment. But what we'll do is make sure that this end of the coil lines up right about here in the same place it did on this spring seat. So we'll start detensioning right now. And where are we there? So this little hump on the spring needs to be right about right here. Now what we'll do is use a little pry tool to make sure the spring goes over the spring pad here as we decompress. Sometimes you'll need to work it like this. Sometimes the spring will just go right into place. There we go. And our spring end is right where it needs to be. So right now, all we have to do is fully decompress and this is done. And get our final couple turns here. We can see the spring compressor is now getting loose on the spring. There we have the compressor. And we have our new assembly now. When the vehicle suspension is compressed, the shock will compress down and it'll push this boot right up against, and will seal all the way through once the vehicle is on the ground and the suspension is compressed. This is now ready to install with all the new parts. Let's go do that now. Okay, so now that you've seen how easy it actually is to replace shocks, struts, or springs on a BMW or Mini, you can do yours as well. Just remember, you need the spring compressor tool that's available in our online website at bavauto.com. If you've liked this video, please hit your like button and send us some comments. We'd like to hear your thoughts. You can also like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Now you go get that shock or strut installed on your BMW or Mini while we go off to do another video.